Awesome. All right. Here they come. Loud applause. Yay. Second one way, guys.
Here, take a picture.
So welcome back, gentlemen. You should have a microphone somewhere. Okay, so which one's CJ? Everybody guess? The man in the white hat. It's a white hat.
It is, yeah.
What happened to the black hat?
I just wear that in the winter.
So it's not one of those Hollywood coats where black is always bad and white is always good?
Nope, it has to do with what season.
Just the weather?
Yeah.
So Jeff, how can you do an event with CJ without headgear?
Well, it's tough. It is tough, and you know, all I can say is that in some circles I'm TJ, similar to CJ. So, you know, I'll have to go with that.
Yeah, I always called you T-Jeff, but TJ is even better.
Mom
right?
called me Mr. T.
Mr. T. Oh my God, isn't that some kind of a Hulk hero kind of a guy?
Yeah.
That's you, right? Okay. So I said we were called this tonight, Wicked Women. So I think an interesting question to start out with would be, Cassie is not wicked, but she's tough. But you have put together in Montana a family of Hutterites. Is that how we pronounce it?
That's what they're. That's where they come from, the Hutterite culture.
So tell us about them, because it's really fascinating.
In Montana, the Hutterites are primarily in Canada, but in this book I wanted to create. I've always been fascinated with multi-generational ranch families who, when the grandchildren or great-grandchildren start to turn on each other, either to take over the ranch or sell it or whatever. And as a newspaper reporter, I used to cover some of those families as they would go at each other and go to war. And I wanted to make probably the most dysfunctional ranch family I could imagine. And I had to come up with their origin. And because of what part of the state it said in the Bitterroot Valley in western Montana, there is an influence from the Hutterite in that moved down from Canada into that area. And this family, fourth generation, is Hutterite. That's their origin, and it's that they became a splinter group, and then another splinter group, and then the guy who finally started the ranch was kicked out of even the littlest splinter group for a bad thing, and he's the matriarch, patriarch, and so the title, The Bitterroots, has two meanings. One's the area, one's this family that has bitter roots.
Yeah, it's actually a great title. I mentioned that when I wrote it up, that it's a double entendre, a double meaning title. But
that's perfect.
it really is, isn't it? So the Hutterites are actually Anabaptists, right, in their origin, but they've become, I think they are.
I can't remember her name.
Just for, no, I think they are. I think they came from Germany.
Oh, they did come from Germany.
From that middle Europe or Protestant thing. And they made it in the 30 Years' War in the 1600s in Europe, pit the Catholics against the Protestants, and it was like one of the bloodiest wars ever, worse than Stalingrad by a lot of reckoning. And so a lot of them left. Not necessarily to come here in 16 whatever, but eventually.
Right, and in my own family, my grandmother was a German who went to Russia and then came back to the U.S. They kicked them out of Russia. So there's a lot of that in the Mountain West.
Right. So there are women in this family and there are men in this family, and it's basically patriarchally structured, but the women have a chance, maybe, to take some of it. Right. So Jeff, you have done. Actually, Patrick, you're going to talk to Jeff. So plunge in.
Well, I just wanted to say, what an honor it is to have these two guys here. Two Edgar Award-winning authors. Jeff's one of the few that's won it twice already.
Three times.
Three times.
Short story.
Yeah, I didn't know that. 3 times. And it just continues to kind of raise the bar for himself. I'm always amazed at what he comes up with. From Silent Joe to the Mercy Rayborn books, and now with this new. So far, there have been 3 of them. A group of kind of classic private eye California novels, but it's really fascinating. The new book is just a knockout. It's a great update. He pays lots of reverence to, if you like Raymond Chandler and Ross McDonald and people like that. There's ghosts of that in there, but it's very much a series about today. And I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you came up with this idea.
Yeah, sure. Well, what a nice intro. Thank you, Patrick. You're a tough man to please because you read it all. And if I can get reviews like that from you, I'm proud. I tell you. Really. Yeah, you know, I always wanted to write a PI story. Haven't never written one until a few years ago when I decided to write a little series about a PI. Love them on TV, love them in fiction, love PIs. Everybody does. And so I thought that I wanted to write a PI, but of course I wanted to write a PI that's like a updated version. I didn't want to do nostalgia, yet I wanted to tap into a little bit of nostalgia as a way to set my character. So in the first page of this new book, The Last Good Guy, these are all first-person books. They're all told by Roland Ford, my PI. He's kind of talking about, there's a scene in every old detective movie where a woman walks into the PI's office and she has a story to tell, and she's going to offer him money to get the truth of it. And you feel like you like them both, but you feel that this story is going to end well for one of them, and it's going to be a winner and a loser. And I reached out and took her hand. So she walks into that reverie in paragraph 2, and he shakes her hand and she introduces herself, and we find ourselves in the middle of a sort of an updated version of the classic cute PI meet, and that's how the book begins. So anyway, I'm trying to do a PI in today's terms, and I'll tell you, I live by the news and the newspapers, and I love getting up and watching and reading about what's going on in our terrible world, and I can write about that through Roland, because all these troubles and these terrible things come to him because they need solving. And so I have this sort of psychiatrist for America, if you will, who's also an action man, and I love the PI because the PI will take a job for money, and the PI will try to make things right, and generally speaking, the PI finds himself fabulously outgunned by the first half of the book, and then things even get worse from there. So I like Roland's chances at the beginning of each story, which are sort of slim and none, and I like helping him pull off these stories. So that's kind of the attitude I'm after. It's here and now. When you finish one of these books, I want you to feel like you have lived through an authentic, fictionalized version of what our world is. Because I think we, as writers, I think that's something that we owe you. I think that's our job. We're both journalists, I think, and we both have that
background.
That background, yeah.
Can I mention one thing? What I loved, I've always been a huge fan of Jeff's work, and I love this new series. And one of the things I love about Roland Ford is that he's ex-military, he's a boxer, but he really liked ballroom dancing. And that's so Jeff Parker to throw that in. But it's really great.
It's complicated that way, right? Well, it's funny, through all of your books, and they've been this really interesting kind of exploration of the weirdness that is Southern California. In crime fiction especially, Michael Connelly, Chandler, all these people I've mentioned, Parker. There's this weird dichotomy, this sort of the darkness, and then there's the light, and I don't have a question here, it's just kind of a reflection. How is California, is it possible to really kind of talk about California, why it's endlessly fascinating to us and to you?
Yeah, well, for me it's really, really, really simple. I was born in Inglewood, Los Angeles, and I grew up in LA and Orange County and now San Diego County, so I'm completely 100% a product of my environment. I've never lived anywhere else, never really sought to. I expect to die in California for whatever that's worth. So anyway, it's my beat, I was an old reporter. We used to be Newport Beach, now it's the whole state, if you will. And I think that California has just so much diversity and so much richness historically and currently. It's a place where things happen unexpectedly, and it's a place of great currents and movements and battling ideologies, if you will. It's the most populous state in the Union, to boot. So anyway, I'm just a guy who grew up there, and when I get up in the morning, like I was saying, for me to wake up in California and look outside my window and see what's going on in our state is important to me, and I feel that, you know, capturing it somehow in some fictional way that resonates and has a ring of truth to it is really kind of important. So I'm proud to be a
the
native son.
CJ should respond to that.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, obviously I write about the Mountain West, primarily.
Wyoming to you is what California is.
It is.
Yeah.
I lived there all my life, except for a stint in college. And growing up there, I mean, it's the least populous state. There's only 600,000 people in the state.
That's interesting.
And but growing up there, I always envied all of the states surrounding there because they all had iconic authors associated with them. In Montana was A.B. Guthrie, and then later Tom McLean and a bunch of others. Nebraska was Willa Cather, Marie Sandoz. Colorado was James Michener. And we were just like this square hole in the middle of the country with no well-known authors at all. And I always thought, if I can ever publish a book, you know, hopefully it will be authentic to the state and the people will read it. They may not love it, but if I want them to say it's authentic. And luckily I've still stuck to that. Now there's quite a few authors that live in Wyoming and surrounding area. But the Joe Pickett series is set entirely in Wyoming. All of the standalones or Cassie Duell books or the Highway books, I don't know what to call this other series, are all set in other states, primarily Montana, which I'm real familiar with because I've got a lot of relatives who live there, and I used to be in the tourism business and do a lot of tours through Montana. So I'm in this book set in the Bitterroot Valley. I grew up going there, visiting it as a little kid. Very rural, very isolated, very mountainous. Really hard to get to. And now, when I went back to research this book, I was sort of astonished by how gentrified it's suddenly become. A lot of out-of-state people have moved there, you know, building McMansions, and what was really, really rural is now really bustling. There's a lot of traffic. And Cassie Duell invented this term that I like when she looked at all the people who live there, called, these are all people who are members of the Church of Trout. Meaning all these people wearing fly fishing clothing and driving big SUVs who never seem to go fishing.
It's the same people that go to ski resorts and spend all their time by the fires swinging rum or whatever kind of thing. Do you know, it's true, when we came to visit you guys here, I find that at my age I just can't drink black coffee anymore. I have to have, you know, foam in it or something, not to be yuppie, but just because my stomach hurts. And I thought, what am I going to do in Wyoming, you know? And I'm telling you, it was littered with not necessarily Starbucks, but homegrown, you know, various coffee. You couldn't go like 12 feet in any town without running into, you know, a coffee shop at all. And I thought, this is not the Wyoming I remember when I was a kid.
Although it still is the fact that a Wyoming vegetarian is someone who only eats meat once a day.
There's some really great restaurants in Wyoming, especially in Jackson Hole.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, it's wonderful. So Cassie, who we have seen on the highway and whatever, at this point, why is she in Montana now?
Well, maybe it's Jeff Parker's inspiration, but in this book, she has left law enforcement. She was with the Sheriff's Department in Montana and then in North Dakota, as she was pursuing the Lizard King, the serial killer. And in this book, she's opened her own private investigative firm in Bozeman, and she's brand new at it. She's a small business owner, and as the book begins, she's offered a job. Not offered a job, but she feels obligated to do a job for somebody she owes a favor to, and that's a defense attorney in Bozeman, whose client is the oldest son of this dynasty ranch family, the dysfunctional one, and the oldest son has been arrested and accused of assaulting his 15-year-old niece. And so it's a very nasty crime, and Cassie doesn't want to work for the other side, and she wants to find the guy guilty and prove that he's guilty so that he'll go to prison. But when she goes north to Saloxa County in the Bitterroot Valley, there's a lot of pushback from the local law enforcement and from the family, and she starts to realize there's a lot more to this story.
Well, won't be a spoiler to say that the older son, in fact, hasn't been at the family home for years. He's made, like a hedge fund guy from the East.
Right. He's committed the crime against his family of leaving it at the very first opportunity, and because he didn't embrace the legacy, they all hate his guts.
So, Henry?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you a number of things about Roland Ford. He has a really interesting kind of backstory, and I have a bad tendency to give away too many spoilers, so I'm trying not to do that. But can you tell us a little bit about kind of what his backstory is and what he's dealt with, and maybe a little bit about what motivates him?
Yeah, sure. When I sat down to begin this series, I knew that it would be a series. I talked to my editor and publishers about it, and so I had to ask myself how to write a hero who you are comfortable with and you can believe in, and you can climb on his back for more than 1 or 2 or 3 books. You need someone with some durability. And so I asked myself when I started writing Roland Ford, what is a hero? What's a modern hero? Heroes change every 10 years, or if not sooner. They're different than they used to be. What is our contemporary version of that? What's my contemporary version of that? So, I wanted to put together a guy who was morally sound. I wanted to create a narrator who was the stone cold opposite of the unreliable narrator. I wanted a guy who's absolutely reliable and that you can get your focus with, and your geography with, and your history with, and your moral bearings with in every page of the book. No doubt about this guy's reliability. I wanted to be capable, physically, mentally, spiritually. I wanted him to be indefatigable, as you've described Joe Pickett. One of the great things about him is he never gives up, and I wanted my guy never to give up. And I also wanted to create a guy who was basically alone in the world. He's a widower. He's lost the great love of his life to an airplane accident. She was a pilot. She dies in the skies alone, in the ocean alone. And he's recovering from that and trying to branch out into the world as a single male again. And I wanted that ideal of what a love can be to haunt Roland as the days go by. And so Roland's alone in the world. He lives in a fabulously beautiful, rundown, aged adobe hacienda in Southern California, inherited from his wealthy wife who passed. And all that he can think of to do after she dies is to rent out the casitas to these funny people who he chooses. And he thereby fights his loneliness and entertains himself with these people in this sort of ramshackle, falling down mansion that he lives in. He's got these casitas that he rents out. So he's alone, he's noble, he's sarcastic, he's physical, he does like to dance, and he won't take no for an answer. And that's kind of the Roland that I envisioned. And plus, here's another interesting thing about him, is in these books, these are first-person tales. So Roland is telling you the story. He's not only the main character, he's the voice. He's the guy, and there's no other point of view in the book. It's all very simple, straightforward, chronologically written, A to Z, first-person storytelling. And so Roland has to have a voice that is that's amenable. You have to like his voice, and I try really hard to make Roland's voice ring true and interesting and of believability on every page. So that's kind of an introduction to Roland and what I'm trying to do with him.
And this group of kind of ragtag people that he's assembled, they're kind of a family in some dysfunctional way. And there's this great guy named Bert who you'll meet if you read the book. Wonderful character. Can you tell us about him just a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Roland calls them the irregulars because they're irregular people, and of course it's a reference back to Sherlock's irregulars. But Roland says the difference between his irregulars and Sherlock Holmes' irregulars is that Roland's irregulars are not fiction. And so they're real people, and in their rotating cast, there's usually 6 of them, and the longest running tenant that Roland has is Bert Short, And Bert's a little short guy, he's shaped like a bull. He's got big shoulders and a big neck and a big head, little feet. He's kind of quick, and he has a very mysterious background. He's physically adept. He's demonstrated a taste and a talent for violence more than once in these books. Really interesting guy. He's one of the foils that you always read in mystery fiction, where Spencer has the Hawk and Joe has Nate, and there's a lot of them. And for me, my version of that is Bert Short. He's sort of Roland's bad guy, and when Roland often underestimated, and the only thing that can really piss Bert off is making fun of his shortness. He hates that. He hates to be made fun of for being short. So anyway, that's an attempt to get to the bottom
So by
of it.
contrast, Cassie Dole was on her own up here, unlike Joe, who has Nate and his family and so forth. Cassie is starting over in a new place, so she does have some ties to it.
That's right, and I really wanted to isolate her in this book, and in several ways. One is that she's got the new job, which means for the first time in her career, she's not law enforcement. She's on the opposite side of law enforcement, and she's very uncomfortable with that. And when the sheriff's department in the Loxa County pushes back and won't answer her questions, she doesn't have any authority at all. And she starts to kind of doubt what she's doing. But in addition to that, it's further the isolation of it. The entire state of Montana is on fire, which is what it was like several years ago when I went up to research the book. And so there's smoke every day. She can't see very far. It presses down. It further isolates her in this area where almost everyone is hostile. So she really has to dig deep to even stick. And everybody she knows, her family, the lawyer who hired her, all say, leave that place. It's not going to go well for you, but she just keeps refusing to leave and stays longer because she's got to figure it out. So this is really kind of exploring her more than the previous books, and what I know about her I really like, and luckily my wife, who's my first reader, my 3 daughters, my agent who's female, my editor is female, all love Cassie Dewell. In some cases more than Joe Pickett, which kind of hurts my heart. But they love her so much that she's just fun to write. There'll probably be another one before too long.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting dynamic if you read them together, because here's Cassie, isolated and trying, and over here we have Roland, who's actually part a lot of this book moving towards connections. Mm-hmm. Not just the irregulars, but with the client and her child and so forth. So Roland is starting from being a loner and trying to move after losing his life and all towards connection. Well, you've taken Cassie out of connections and put her in a different place, but both of them are operating as private eyes. So, I think the private eye form is amazingly fluid, don't you, Patrick?
Maybe they should meet.
I don't think Cassie will like Southern California. I just don't see it.
It would be interesting, though.
I think Cassie would be too clumsy to dance.
I think it speaks volumes for the private eye novel, that you can take such different approaches to it. You can write in third person, you can write from Roland's point of view, you can have different kinds of cases, you can have all kinds of different personal dynamics. Now, what do you think the common threads are in a private eye novel, since Joe, in a way, is sort of a private eye, even if he's officially a game warden?
Well, I mean, I never think about it like that. I think of more of the investigation peels back the layers of a community or an area. I always start with the area, like all the standalones that I've written all have a place name in the title because they're about that place, and in this case, the Bitterroots. So the investigation is what reveals the community and the culture behind it, and this ranch family that dominates everything. And having her isolated and doing the interviews and finding out more is all about getting to the heart of the black beating heart of this place.
So in your case, it could either be a law enforcement person, or a private eye.
Right.
But I don't think in Jeff's case, the kind of books you write could they can't really be law enforcement. Roland really does need. Do you think so, Patrick? That Roland really needs to be private?
Yeah, I do.
Patrick,
I do.
when I could just say.
It's a whole different deal. It's a whole different deal. Sorry. If you're going to cut a hero loose from the bureaucracy, you have a completely different guy or girl, woman. And that's the beauty for me of the PI form, if you will, is that the person is non-beholden to any bureaucracy, and she is alone, and that puts them at a fantastic disadvantage. And I think it's wonderful to posit a hero, heroine in a novel who can give you something other than the party line. You know, I'm so sick of the party line. You know, and it takes an independent operator. It takes a PI, if you will, to address the world in an honest, individual way, without the sway of the bureaucracy and politics and the job and all that stuff behind them. They need to be free, and I think that's really cool about the PI. And when I look back to my favorite PIs, they're all the same. I mean, they all do that. You know, they don't take orders from anybody. They can smell a rat before anybody else does, and they're often, you know, always outnumbered, always outgunned, but they always get the job done. And so I like that. I think it's just a craving to write the underdog for sure. You know, I love the underdog. Yeah. So I like the form a lot. I like the form. I hope that the series, my series, I hope you like it, and I hope that you guys enjoy it. And I hope to write more. You know, I would like to write Roland into, you know, several more books and kind of see where things go.
I hope you do, because I love them.
Thank
and
you.
know, one thing I love about both of our PIs is the fact that they address the business part of the job. They both talk about how much money they have to make, how much they have to earn from the client. It always had driven me crazy growing up reading these great PI novels where they always gave the money back, you know, but they had great cars, you know, and it would drive me nuts. You know? So.
Well, also, you know, you think of the classic PI, you know, today's PI operates quite a bit differently, you know, with all the technological, you know, help at our disposal. And you really worked that into this book, in the 3 books. Did you have to do a little bit of research on current PI technology?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, PIs these days are married to the internet, as you might imagine. That's not new, but it's sort of new given the, you know, how long the genre's been around. So yeah, you know, Roland is conversant with how to find things out about people quickly, and you know, it's really interesting. In just the last, say, 10 years, 20 years. I mean, it seems like the whole pivot of the individual in the world, certainly in America, but in the world, has gone from protecting one's privacy to shrieking one's publicity. You know, like everybody wants to be known. I want to post this about me. It's all about the selfie. It's about getting out there. And so Roland just scarfs on that stuff. I mean, he's like a trout with, you know, trichos falling down into the water. He's just gobbling this information up because people leave such a huge trail now. You know, and it's really not that hard to follow. So Roland's, you know, savvy with that, and this is interesting, I think, there are several expensive, high-end, really, really good investigative services who are engageable online, TLO, trackers, there's another one, it's 3, and mostly they work for PIs, banks, lawyers, law enforcement sometimes, and they're these giant databases run by really smart guys, and you can find out a lot about people that you wouldn't think, and these guys will do it. They're expensive, but they'll do it, and you can find out a ton if you're willing to subscribe to these services. And Roland subscribes to all of them, and when he wants to know something about somebody, you can bring it up on your phone. He can sit in a bar and he can find out stuff about these people who he's just barely, all he has to go on is a name or facial recognition, and Roland can use that stuff. So I think the high-tech world, if you will, you know, the social media and all the things that we can do now on our computers that we couldn't do 20 years ago, I think is really interesting, you know. And I know some PIs, and that's what they do. That's how they operate. They literally never have to leave their office. anymore, and they don't drive around following people. Although Roland does that a lot, because I love that. I love cars, and I love the idea that you wait for a guy to come out of his office or his home or whatever it is, and you go after him. You know, so I got the old style PI stuff in there too.
Where can I get one of these wasp nest cameras?
Oh yeah.
They're pretty cool in the book.
Pretty cool.
Are those real, or did you make those up?
Well, I've seen them on animal, you know, the nature stories where they disguise the cameras as babies and eggs and different things. I've never seen in the new book. I have wasp cam, we call it, and it's like a, you know, those kind of mud dog, the wasp nests that'll be up on the stucco of your house, up under the eaves and stuff, and they're brown and they have the holes where the wasps come and go. And in the book, Roland's good friend Dale Clevenger, one of the irregulars, is an Animal Planet cameraman guy. He invents builds these cameras and these programs for watching animals in the wild. And so the wasp cam figures pretty big in this book, because there's this compound out in the desert, and Roland has no idea how to keep an eye on this place. He goes there one time early in the book, and 6 helmeted security guards beat the living shit out of him. They almost kill him. So really, and so he's afraid of this place. And Bert says, "Oh, we can handle it." You know, Bert's like this big, and so they devise this plan to get Bert into the place where these terrible people are living, and plant these wasp cams. So anyway, the wasp cams come back, and they feed back in real time. They're motion activated, and they show Roland and Bert back home in California, away from the compound in the desert, what's going on in the desert. And it's kind of cool because they're motion activated, so you only catch the moments in the compound when something's going on, and then the cameras go dead. And you're not really sure what's going on in between. You know, at one point there's a bunch of cars coming, and a bunch of families and children coming out and going into this weird building, and then it goes blank, and then when they go away, and then, you know, it cuts to activity in this barn behind these security screen doors where there are these workbenches, and you can only get in with keys, and there's these mysterious people in hazmat suits walking around. So you never really kind of get the whole deal until the end, when Roland finally breaches the Citadel and gets to the truth of it.
So let's not forget the drone. And in fact, in
drones,
your
yeah.
book from last spring, which, how many of you have read Wolfpack? Lots of you. Remember? It starts out with Scottsdale is the killing field. The assassins at the Valley Ho checked in, and Poisoned Pen is the lure.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But I love that. You were so cute, but I finally wrote my review and sent it to CJ. He said, "Jeez," he said, "I've been waiting for you to read it."
It was a test.
I know. But you really make use of drone technology in that book. Jeff has a little drone guide in this one, but drones I would think would be hugely appealing for Joe, particularly.
Well, in that case, though, they're a threat, because and that is an issue in national parks and for hunting. Ethics is that drones are being used in some cases to take pictures of parks, but also to locate trophy game animals. It's illegal in almost every state, but it's really hard for law enforcement to ever catch those guys. I mean, everybody who has one is supposed to register with the FAA, is that right? Very few do. And when there's a drone in the air, how are you going to catch the operator? So it's a real dilemma. And yeah, in the book, The Wolfpack, they're being used to stampede animals off a winter range, and it's lethal to the deer and the elk on it. But Nate Romanowski figures out how to go get him.
He's got his own drones, right? I love them. They fly by themselves, right? Well, I don't see how either one of you can really write, you know, and ignore not just the wasp thing, but you really can hardly ignore drones anymore, because for surveillance and other stuff, you know, they're a great way to go. So, Cassie, the Lizard King, she was in law enforcement, and that required movement up and down the highway. Yeah, I haven't been able to go to a trucker rest stop peacefully for some time. I drove home from Santa Fe to Scottsdale a couple weeks ago, coming down 40, and I avoided the truck stops and stopped at the little Chevron station to the Holbrook, because I thought, surely the Lizard King, there was no big rig. Where did you get, you know, because this
First,
is only met Cassie.
I have to start with it. I cannot envision Barbara Peters hanging around a truck stop.
That's true. They have, you know, I've been in a lot of truck stops, but not driving a rig. But they're actually a very good place on the interstate. You know, they offer. I haven't personally taken advantage of the showers, but they do offer a very wide range of service. Maybe I should try that, right? I'll carry a Cassie dual in. Scare everybody.
Where did I get the idea for that? It still reverberates with Cassie even in the new book, where everything has kind of been resolved, but she's got two things that just haunt her. One is the memory of her mentor, Cody Hoyt, who kind of taught her the ropes, and she's always wondering what would Cody do in this situation. And the other thing is the specter of the Lizard King, that even though she knows he's no longer there, she still has a feeling that he might be out there, and that comes through the book. But the whole idea of the trucker thing, two things happened in my life at the same time. My youngest daughter was going to the University of Wyoming, and she was going back and forth to Cheyenne from Laramie on I-80, where there's lots and lots of trucks. And she came home for Thanksgiving, and I went and checked her little red car. My youngest daughter is really cute and little blonde girl. And I went out and checked her car, which was horrible because it was always full of trash. But I turned it on, and the check engine light came on immediately. And I went in the car and I said, "How long has that been on?" And she said, "Don't worry about it, Dad, it's always on." And she had like 1 quart of oil in her car. And I started thinking she's going to break down, what had happened. And at the same weekend in the Wall Street Journal, there was a story about that the FBI had just created a highway serial killer task force. Because they figured at that time, and that would have been 6 years ago or so, that there were probably over 1,000 missing truck stop prostitutes. And it was probably the work of 20 to 24 drivers. They've since doubled both of those numbers, and only one has ever been caught. So those two things, it's like my worst nightmare is my daughter breaking down on the highway and all these truckers. So that's how that came about.
Wow. If that doesn't make you want to write a novel, what will?
I thought of it as a warning to parents, don't let your crazy kids, because kids these days never pay any attention to their cars. Like we grew up, we have to fix them all the time, look at everything. Now they just go. They never break down until they do.
Well, mostly you're getting gas at the pump and there's no mechanic who comes out. I always go to Bridwell at Scottsdale Road and Lincoln because it's an actual gas station. And even though I'm paying slightly more, they come out and they check your tires and look under the hood and wash them. I don't know how to do any of that, so I could wash the window. But beyond that, it's just kind of a little safety thing. But you don't get that opportunity too many places anymore.
No, nobody thinks about it.
Right. And so Cassie is really suffering still from a kind of PTSD, right?
Right,
because
right.
And she'll never really get rid of it.
Yeah, it's early on in the book where she falls asleep and she can feel the rumbling on the street, and she looks outside and sees a gigantic semi parked right in front of her house that blacked out windows, and nobody else seems to see it. So she wonders if it's real. Is he back? Is it someone else? Don't know.
When we first met Roland, he was suffering from, or dealing with somebody suffering from PTSD, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Roland's he's a veteran of Fallujah. He was in the first Fallujah, and that was a bloody turning point in the war in Iraq, of course, as you all know. And so he carries he carries his own PTS. It's not quite a disorder, but it's still stress. I've interviewed a lot of Marines because I live right next door to a Marine base. I live in Fallbrook, California, which is right next to Camp Pendleton, and I've noticed that all the guys I've talked to who are in combat, bring back different versions of stress, post-traumatic stress, because combat's such a horrible thing. And they all really seem to deal with it in different ways. So when you start talking about PTSD, it's broad, and it's not real detailed, but I've written about it a lot. I mean, more than once I've gone out of my way to kind of peel back the different versions of it, if you will. And Roland is an experiencer of that thing, so he can speak with some authority, at least from his own condition. And I think that's really true. And back to what I said a few minutes ago about creating Roland in the beginning, and what is a hero now, and what's a representative guy. I wanted to make him fairly young. When the Roland Ford books opened, he's only 38 years old, and so which allowed me to have Roland be a veteran of war, because it seems to me that if you're going to write a representative young American hero, especially a man, that man should have gone to war, because we've been in war for 20 fucking years, right? Okay?
Yeah.
So he is now representative of that, and I think that's really important. And so he's got his own version. He plays it down, and in the book I'm working on now, it gets under his skin like it is for Cassie, and it's going to have to be dealt with. So next book is going to be about it.
Did you mention that great book you wrote called Full Measure?
Yeah.
What a terrific book. Did anybody check that out?
Oh, thank you.
Not, look it up. Great
I did.
book.
I read it.
All right. Yeah, it's about a Marine who comes home. It's a good story. Check it out.
I was going to talk a little bit about, or ask you a little bit about, I know, what is it, maybe 10 years ago you moved from a little bit further up the coast in the Orange County area down to San Diego area, and you were so known for writing about that Orange County and Laguna and all these places, and it's really interesting seeing a lot of people think of San Diego as this cheery, bright, without a dark side, and it has such a fascinating history.
Yeah.
San Diego, and you're writing about the Imperial Valley, which is really interesting. Has it been a lot of fun to kind of investigate this new part of the state?
Yeah, I really like writing about where I live. I just, it's one of the bonuses of being a writer. I love it. Everything you do is material, because you're writing about where you live. And I wrote about Orange County and grew up in Orange County, and my first 10, 15 books were all Orange County, really. And then when I moved to San Diego, it's 20 years ago now. I moved there in 2000. And that opened up to me the whole new world that Patrick's talking about. Because San Diego County is very different than Orange County, and both of them are very different than LA County, even though they all are contiguous, So it opened up a new world to me, the border, the cartels, the desert. San Diego is a much rougher, raunchier place than Orange County will ever be. It's as raunchy as Los Angeles County, if you want to look at it that way. And me, as a writer, I like raunch. I like crime. I like dangerous places to write about, And I remember sitting down once. This is so long ago. I wanted to write a serial killer book, because everybody was writing serial killer books. This was the Thomas Harris days, mid '80s. So I wanted to do that too. And so I got it in my head that I was going to write a serial killer book set in Orange County, in the hardest place to write a serial killer story, to set a serial killer story in. Irvine, California, a master planned community, right? And so I did, and I think that was one of the hardest assignments I ever tasked myself with, was writing a serial killer book that takes place in Irvine. It's really a scary, creepy book too. You'd really like it. It's the Blue Hour. And now, now that I'm down in San Diego, it's opened up all new things for me. The new books are moving eastward towards the border, towards Arizona, towards Mexico. And I'm getting into the specifics of San Diego's own history, which is just really cool. So you always get a little bit of history in my books, kind of like Chuck's. There's a topic, there's a place.
You move around. How do you figure out which part of Wyoming you want to write about? Do you look at the location and then find the story, or do you think of the story and then work out where Wyoming, for Joe Pickett anyway, it would best take place?
That one, it's more the story, and then I figure out where it would be best be set. And like you say, I have moved it all around, where it's a red desert in Wyoming, Jackson Hole, Yellowstone. I just finished the first draft of the new Joe Pickett book last week, and it's back in the Bighorns, primarily where because the previous one was set in Saratoga, Wyoming.
Right.
So he's back home, and it's always good to go back. Can't keep him moving, but the next one I think will be set in another kind of more obscure part of the state. Because it's such a big state, you can move them around to like California, of course, or Montana, which is. I did an interview today where somebody was asking about the distances in this book, and you know, I think they were from upstate New York, and I was saying, you know, do you realize that Montana is the size of Germany, and Wyoming is the size of France? I mean, these are big states, and the guy, I don't think he believed me.
I often point out to visiting British writers that you can put the entire British Isle in Arizona, and they kind of go, but you can hardly move crossing the British Isle because of the density of the population and all the rest of it. So for them, it actually takes longer to drive a short distance than it does us to go across. So one thing we haven't talked about was one of the reasons we're all here together tonight, fishing.
Yeah.
So you two guys are fishing buddies. So tell us about, CJ, tell us about a great fishing trip that you and TJ have made.
We've had a lot of great fishing trips. Yeah, there's a group of 4 of us that have is it 15 years?
It's 17.
17.
Last year was the 16th.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
For 17 years, we go someplace. We all get together. Brian Whiproot, who's also an author, and a guy named Ken Wilson, who's like a media escort out of LA. And we got together at a book conference, I think, like Left Coast Crime or something like that. We had discovered that all of us fished. We all decided we should fish together. And luckily, every year, usually September, October, we go someplace exotic. And every other year, tended to be lately, we go to Baja, Sea of Cortez, Mexico. But then in the off year, someplace in the United States for either trout. This year in September, it'll be for redfish in Louisiana. We did a wilderness trip into Yellowstone one year where we went in on horses and stayed in little tents. And some of it's been pretty wild. And all the mountain states and also the eastern part of the state. And it's fun. It's really fun once a year to get together with other authors, and especially with Jeff, because Ken drives me crazy most of the time. But and hopefully it'll continue on forever. You know.
Yeah, I hope so. I got a collection. Say what?
Do you have a great fishing story?
Oh God, there's so many. No, I mean, yeah, they're just we just had a blast in so many ways, and we almost got run out of Baja by a hurricane 3 years ago. I mean, it was pretty serious. It was pretty awesome. We've caught a ton of good fish together. You know, we're competitive, we're good-natured. You know, a terrible day of fishing is still a day of fishing, and we just have a blast. You know, we really enjoy each other's company and stuff. And it's really nice to see something go on that long. I have a hat rack in my office, which is literally weighted with fishing caps. Brian makes a fishing cap every year with the representative fish on it and the bill. It's a good hat, baseball fishing sort of hat. And then the number it is, like last year's was 16, and there was whatever it was on it, fish on it. That we were trying to catch, and so the hat stand in my office is just sagging under the weight of these things. I've got 16 of them, and they're salty and heavy and dirty, and they're just great. And my wife the other day was saying, she goes, well, what number? We call it the Fisherman's Gauntlet, which is really an interesting story. It'd take too long to tell, but the gauntlet is coming up in next month in Louisiana. He goes, it's going to be 17. She goes, wow. 17. That's a lot. That's a lot of time to have good friends and a tradition that I have every intention of continuing until they pull me off stage.
One thing we do, a tradition that I think started year 1 that continues on, that's kind of ridiculous, is one of the nights of the week we have the meat bucket night. Yeah. And that means usually over a campfire. We have steaks and brats and chicken and every kind of meat imaginable. And then we have 2 or 3 sprigs of asparagus that nobody eats. That's all we have.
California, I'll give you asparagus, but nobody eats it. They say, oh, Jeff, that was so good.
Greenery. Hey, there was a green vegetable involved. So, do you abandon your hat for a fishing camp?
I do sometimes, but I also use a straw cowboy hat for fishing if it's hot.
So if we do this again, I think you guys have to come in fishing headgear, don't you? Yeah.
We could wear our vests and waders.
Yeah, we could.
We could flood the store, make it real.
Isn't it getting a little sharky out in Southern California
Yeah.
these days? I've
Yeah.
heard. Have you had any good shark stories?
No, I haven't seen any sharks lately. I've been fishing the coast a lot though in San Diego, surf fishing, but no sharks yet. It's pretty rare, you know, unless it happens to you. You know?
So Patrick, did you have any final? We cut you off. A question that you
No,
would
no,
like
no.
to have asked? Well, then
No.
maybe we should turn it over to the audience and see who would like to ask questions. Do you want to be the MC?
Sure. Does anybody have a question of either Jeff or I or both? Yes. Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Did your Cassie, did her son go with her?
Did Cassie's son go with her? Yes.
So he's
In the new
contact
book, he's
too?
15 years old. He's kind of an awkward kid. He's kind of in love with a girl, but he can't figure out why are they always have feelings about everything, and that kind of thing. And Cassie kind of hates to leave him because he's in a tough place where he's not doing well in sports, and he's sort of in love, but doesn't know how to deal with it. Yes, in the back.
For either of you gentlemen, when you start your stories, do you know your endings? You want to start?
Sure, thank you. No, I don't. I don't know the endings of my stories when I start them. I have pretty firm notions about who will live and who will die, but I'm not really sure beyond that how it's going to happen, and that in itself can change dramatically. I've noticed the last few years that I've been writing, the last, say, 6 or 8 books especially, as I approach the midway point and as I work into the second half of the book, I become more and more anxious about how the story's going to end, because I have no idea how I'm going to end the story, and it makes me nervous. And I start to worry, and I wake up, and I think about possible endings and things, and so I will often. I wrote the last chapter of my new book a couple of months ago now, 3 weeks ago now, and up until the last scene, I didn't know what was going to happen in that scene, and something huge happens in that scene, and that's kind of the way I like it. I like to track down the story in a page-by-page way that is interesting and will leave the book hopefully unputdownable to you as a reader. But I don't want you ever to figure out to know what's going to happen at the end of that book, and I don't, and so I hope that you don't too. Chuck?
And Jeff and I have talked about this. There is no right way, wrong way.
Yeah.
But I tend to be an outliner. I do the research on the book. I sit down and I do bullet points from the first chapter all the way to the end on how I envision the end to take place. And then I start to write the book on top of that outline. But that's not to say that it'll always stick. The end of the Bitterroots, for example, has a final twist that I didn't anticipate writing till I got there. So that surprised me, and I figure if it surprises me, it's going to surprise the reader, because I didn't know I was going there. And I've written a couple of books where my wife has read the end and said, "What if this happened?" And I think, "Oh, that's much better. I'll change that." So even though the outline keeps me between the rails, but it doesn't dictate start to finish.
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember that the book you read is not necessarily almost never the first draft of the book that the writer produces. You know, that's your skeleton, but then lots of things can change. So for you, the book may well have been different than the book. I can't believe that the final twist, which I can't reveal, of this new book, you either had to go back and write some of it in, or you must have seen it coming. I can't imagine how you got there just spontaneously. We can't answer that. But when you read it, you remember my question and say to yourself, surely he didn't just get there.
Yes, sir.
So physically, every morning when you get up and you're in the writing mood, what is that like? I mean, I go to an office. You get up, have coffee? How does that work?
I go into an office, and I'm lucky to have my office. It's exactly 75 steps from the front door of my house. So I have a cup of coffee and a Labrador, generally, as I emerge from the house at 7 in the morning, and I walk 75 steps to my office, which is an ugly, kind of a homely metal building, like a shrunk down, like a machine shop would be in, or an airplane hangar, you know, metal building. And I let myself in, and I have part of it. It's a big building. It's 1,500 square feet, but half of it is finished off as nicely. The rest of it's just like bicycles and fishing gear and all that kind of stuff that a person has, and you know, dog stuff. And the office is really nice. So it's all books. It's all paintings. Every single thing in that office is something that I love. And it's all my stuff. And I just love it out there so much. I'm so happy when I get out there. And I work from 7 to 5, Monday through Friday. And my idea of a really good day's work, attainable good day's work, is 5 pages a day. If I can get 5 pages in a day, that's 25 in a week. And I'm gloating by Friday afternoon if I've gotten 5 pages, if I've gotten 25 pages that week. If I've only gotten 4 pages a day, then that's 20 pages. That's still a lot of good work, you know? So that's my day. I go back and forth and get fresh coffee every hour or two, and that's how I work.
Are you alone?
Yeah, I am. I don't answer the phone. I don't do much internet stuff in the morning. Well, morning's my good time. I love the morning. I like it when it's quiet, phones aren't ringing, and I seem to be clear in the head. I always read what I wrote the day before in detail. Say it's 5 pages. I read those 5 and I scan back, and I kind of go quickly through the manuscript, even if it's 300 or 400 pages long at that point. I kind of skim through really quickly just to kind of get the original feel that I started with, you know, a year ago sometimes, or 6 months ago, and then I'll, you know, put myself into the scene, and hopefully, if I'm really lucky, I will have left that scene half written, sometimes even mid-sentence the day before, so that when I get there in the morning, I know exactly what I have to do. I'm in this scene where this guy's saying this to this woman, and this is going on, and middle of the sentence, what's the next word? And then if you can connect with living tissue every morning, it's really nice, and which is why it's really hard to go fishing for a week, or do a book tour for a week or two, or take off for the holidays for a week or two. You get back to your book and it's like, who wrote this? Talk about a mystery. It's like,
I would challenge a little bit of the premise of your question. It said when you're in a writing mood, and I would say if you could only write when you're in a writing mood, I would still be working on book 2. I mean, it's your job. It's what you do every day. I have a similar schedule to Jeff's. I think I put in less hours, actually. We have a little ranch. We built a barn recently, and my office is on the top of a barn, so physically it's about 100 yards away from our house. And so I go down there every day. I worry more about word count than page count, but it's basically the same premise. And once I get that done, I know I've accomplished my goal. Sometimes that can just be in a couple of hours. Sometimes it takes 7 or 8 to get to that word count because it's such a struggle. And then I do the same thing. Next day, read what I wrote, edit it, move on. Probably the difference between our schedules, we were talking about it tonight, is I'll take a break and go outside and shoot some animals. We have prairie dogs in our horse pasture, and we don't want them there. So I'll take a break and go out and set up and blast a couple of those. Yeah, it's very cathartic.
Are you alone? Writing, are you alone, CJ?
Of course, yeah. I can't even imagine. As opposed to like with a writing assistant.
Well, I didn't know if there's a staff that sits around you.
Jeff has a huge research staff, but I work alone.
This is a 4-legged research staff.
Yeah, 4-legged research staff.
It probably helps to remember that both of them came from reported from journalism, and so writing, you know, is not just when you feel like it, it is your job, and
Jeff has a maid and a butler, I believe.
Did they go fishing with you and put out the big bucket?
You've got gun bearers, Chuck. I'll talk to your neighbors.
Right, or you kill passing visitors, for example, by giving them a 45. Yes.
CJ, I was mad at you on one of your books. Why did you kill off Cody?
Yeah.
You know what? That's called a spoiler. question for those who haven't read the book.
Well, we actually mentioned it earlier, to be fair.
Yeah.
That she's
Not-
that what happened.
But
No.
anyway, you know, that was a character, two reasons, to be honest. One was he was a fun character to write, but he was not unique to the genre in that he was an alcoholic cop with a bad background who kind of spun out of control, much like a lot of characters like that in other books. And I realized I was kind of writing. He was really, in a way, kind of easy to write because that character exists in so many books. And midway through that book, I thought, I want to do something I've never seen in another book, and that is kill off the protagonist of a character who a lot of people assume was the start of his new series. Just to kind of throw a kink in there.
And you did.
And I did. And a lot of people are still kind of angry with me, as you are. But him stepping aside did kind of open the door for Cassie Duell, who I thought was a much more nuanced, interesting character.
His presence is felt.
Thank you.
Yeah, his presence is felt throughout, though.
Yeah, she's always,
He's
it's
there
still.
in some
Yeah.
capacity.
And actually, the sad truth is that both of them are the gods of their books and, you know, of their universe. And, you know, sometimes God is not fair. It just isn't. So I think at this point, we need to thank our authors for coming. So let's do And now we're going to get to a part where we thank you. And I have tonight to give away the new Preston and Child called Old Bones. They will be here on August 20th. This is a fabulous start of a new series with two characters you have already met in Preston and Child, one of whom is Nora Kelly, who's an archaeologist, which is Doug's actual real passion. And the other, you might have met her, Corey Swanson. And now she's a brand new FBI agent. She's just come out of Quantico, and she is caught up in a case that takes place in the Sierra Nevadas, and they're going back to investigate one of the truly terrible American tragedies with a lot of interesting twists. Anyway, I think this is one of the best books they've written in a really long time, and I'm delighted it's going to be a series. Susan, what are we doing? 64. All right. Can I get you, Mr. Box, to pick a number between 1 and 64? You have to be here to win.
38.
Did I hear a squeal? All right. So I will give you that, and you can come back on Tuesday the 20th and get Doug and Lincoln to sign it. So it'll be great. I'm going to add that we are almost sold out of the copy signed by both authors of Old Bones. So if you have not ordered one online or here, and you want one, you'd better do it because we're blasted through it and we're going to be out. That doesn't mean that we won't have books or that Doug can't sign them, but you won't get a book signed by both of them.
Can you get one tonight, or do you have to get it?
You can order it tonight. We can't give it to you until August 20th. And that reminds me, I have now congratulated both CJ and TJ on this being their publication date. This is the first night that these two books are available. So we thank all of you very much for coming. We hope if you're new to the store, you'll sign up for our e-news up at the counter, and you'll come see us again. I'm going to ask if you all stay seated for a minute. If you guys could stand up and move your, Patrick will help you.